You have to understand the layout of my school. The main building is where all the classrooms are, but the track team has to use the separate field house. It's this standalone brick building near the back fence. It feels isolated even on a normal day. We were wrapping up practice when the intercom blared. Not the tinny sound from the classroom speakers, but this sharp, urgent alarm tone. The voice wasn't the principal's, it was the emergency automated message: external threat detected. Initiate immediate full lockdown. Seek shelter now. Coach Willis didn't hesitate. He grabbed us, me, Mia, and Ben, and shoved us into the smallest room in the whole building, the equipment closet. It's barely big enough for 4 people and smells like old leather and sweat. The coach slammed the thick steel door shut and locked it. He didn't even bother with the lights. We were in total, black darkness. We stayed there for about 20 minutes, maybe more. It was so quiet we could hear the thump-thump of our own heartbeats. The whole campus was silent. No sirens, no shouting, just dead air, which somehow felt worse. We were all huddled, using our phones on mute to try and get news, but the school Wi-Fi had been cut. Then, the static. That familiar, high-pitched ZZZZZZT of the main campus intercom system coming to life. We all froze. And then, Principal Miller's voice, clear as a bell, came over the speaker mounted on the exterior wall. "Attention, all personnel," the voice said. "The threat has been contained. I repeat, the threat is over. All clear. Resume normal activities." We apologize for the alarm. Mia sighed this huge whoosh of relief. Coach Willis actually smiled for the first time. "Thank God," he whispered, grabbing the door handle. "Let's go, people. We need to get you back to your parents." As Coach went to unlock the door, something hit me. It wasn't the words. It was the sound. I've heard Principal Miller talk every single morning for 4 years. His voice always catches a little on the word personnel. He has this tiny, signature clearing of the throat right after he says all personnel. But this voice, it was too perfect. Too smooth. It was the right tone, the right words, but it lacked the glitch. "Coach, wait!" I hissed. Did the power come back on? "Look at the light under the door." He paused, his hand on the lock bar. The light seeping in from the gap at the bottom of the door was still this dull, emergency gray. The building lights had not flipped back on. If the threat was contained and the all clear was sounded, the power would be fully restored, always. That was protocol. Ben whispered, terrified. It sounded just like him, though. "Yeah," I said, my blood running cold. "That's the problem. It sounded exactly like him, like a recording. Like someone played his voice through the speaker." Coach Willis stared at me for a long, silent second. He slowly took his hand off the lock bar. His smile was gone. He was listening now, not to the intercom, which had gone silent again, but to the rest of the field house. He knew. The realization hit us all at once. The only reason someone would use a fake all clear is to flush out people from their hiding spots. They knew we were in lockdown. They just needed to know where. "No noise," the coach mouthed, his eyes wide. He pulled a bandana off his wrist and tied it around the lock bar, just to be sure. But as he pulled away, we all heard it. It came from right outside our door. Not a footstep, not a cough. Just this deliberate, sickeningly slow thwack, the sound of a long shadow, or something heavy, hitting the concrete right outside our door. We scrambled back into the deepest corner of the closet, huddling so close we were breathing the same stale air. The silence returned, but it was worse now, because we knew we had been identified. The field house was completely surrounded by the wide-open expanse of the track. We had been waiting for safety in a tiny steel box that felt more like a cage. Then, a new voice. It was deep, rasping, and utterly devoid of the principal's warm tone. And it was coming from the air vent right above our heads. "It didn't work for you guys, did it?" The voice chuckled, low and dry. "You caught the glitch." Mia let out a choked cry, but the coach slapped a hand over her mouth. "Too bad," the voice continued, sounding closer, colder. "You know, the track looks so lovely and open in the late afternoon. Perfect for a long, final run." We knew he was gone again, moving through the building, knowing exactly who was trapped in the field house equipment room, and knowing we were the only ones who had avoided his trap. The all clear wasn't an end. It was a start. And we were the only ones left to hunt. Everyone knows Mr. Alton. He's our history teacher, maybe 50 years old, built like a fire hydrant, and he never, ever breaks stride. If the school burned down, he'd probably just keep grading papers and tell us to use a primary source for the fire's cause. So when the lockdown alarm went off, the really serious one, not the drill, Mr. Alton was exactly the calm presence you'd expect. He moved like a machine, lights off, door locked, bookshelf shoved against it. We all dove under the heavy oak tables, trying to disappear into the dark corners of the room. We were silent. The only sound was the frantic thump-thump of the gym class running past outside. But then, as he crouched by the door, Mr. Alton didn't look at the students, or the window. He was staring at his desk, and his face was white, absolutely drained of color. He put his hands together, and he started to whisper. At first, I thought he was just praying for all of us, like a general please keep us safe thing. We were all huddled close to the floor, and I was right behind a massive filing cabinet, near Chloe and Liam. Mr. Alton was maybe 6 feet away. Then, I heard the words clearly, and they weren't general. They were horrifyingly specific. He wasn't praying to God, he was pleading with him. "Please," he was whispering, shaking so hard his jacket sleeves rustled. "Please, not here. Not now. Don't let him finish the list. I swore I kept them safe. I swore I did my part. Finish the list?" "What list?" I nudged Chloe, whose eyes were huge dark saucers in the dim light. She'd heard it too. Liam gave a tiny, panicked shake of his head. "Don't move, don't talk." Mr. Alton shifted and leaned his head against the cold cement wall. He whispered one last thing, a choked, ragged sound. It was supposed to be over the moment the yearbook was destroyed. That's when the shift happened. Suddenly, the intruder outside wasn't the main problem. The problem was Mr. Alton, the man who was supposed to protect us, who knew exactly why someone was trying to break into the building. He didn't just know the person, he knew the motive. A list? A destroyed yearbook? This was personal, and we were trapped in a room with the only person who had the answers. Chloe pointed at his desk. I followed her gaze. On top of a stack of papers, right where Mr. Alton had been looking, was a beat-up, old, burgundy-colored yearbook. It was maybe 30 years old. It looked nothing like ours. The teacher wasn't scared for his life in a random school shooting. He was scared because whatever dark secret he buried decades ago, the secret tied to that old yearbook and that awful list, had just crawled out of the past and was currently knocking on the school's front door. Liam tried to signal us to back up further, but there was nowhere to go. We were pressed against the cold filing cabinet, listening to Mr. Alton quietly unraveling. Then, we all heard it together. It was a slow, deliberate scrape of metal on linoleum floor, coming from the hallway right outside our door. It wasn't someone running or smashing things, it was methodical. It sounded like something heavy was being dragged, or maybe just a single person walking very slowly, scraping something as they went. Mr. Alton pressed his ear against the door, his eyes squeezed shut, sweat beading on his forehead. We watched him, terrified that he would crack and shout something, giving us away. The scraping stopped. It was right there. Then, a faint sound, like a piece of paper sliding under the door. Mr. Alton saw the paper. His whole body went rigid. He didn't move towards it. He just stared at the sliver of light peeking out from under the heavy bookshelf. It took forever, but finally, he dropped to his knees, slow as an old man, and slid his hand out. He grabbed the corner of the paper and pulled it out from under the door. It was a folded sheet from a composition notebook. He didn't open it. He just held it, and his shoulders started shaking uncontrollably. He knew what it said. He knew who it was from. Then, the whisper came from the hallway, muffled but clear, right next to the door. "You kept the yearbook, Mr. Alton." That was the mistake. Mr. Alton crumpled to the floor, sobbing silently, clutching the note. We were safe from the person outside only because the bookshelf was there. But the moment the intruder left, we realized the horrifying truth. The man who was supposed to keep our secret safe was the key to our danger, and now that his secret was revealed, we were just collateral damage in a fight that started decades before we were born. The only thing standing between us and an avenging stranger was the broken man on the floor who now knew his life, and ours, was over. You know that feeling on the last day of school? That clock watching, pure euphoria? That was us. I was in Mr. Davies's history class, 5th period, about 10 minutes away from summer freedom. We were signing yearbooks, throwing crumpled paper across the room, classic high school chaos. Then, the announcement. It wasn't the principal's voice, it was this pre-recorded, robotic, dead serious tone. "Attention. This is not a drill. Initiates secure the perimeter protocol. Lock doors, lights off, remain silent." The air just completely froze. Mr. Davies, who is usually super chill, went pale. He immediately lunged for the door, slammed it, and flipped the heavy metal bar on the lock. We all scrambled to the corner, away from the door and windows, getting low. It was quiet enough to hear the thud of the fire extinguisher being wedged under the door handle. This was not a fire alarm. This felt heavy, you know? Like real danger. We were sitting there, 25 teenagers piled up against the supply cabinets, trying not to breathe too loud. I kept hearing this frantic static sound from the main office's loudspeaker, then just silence. It felt like forever. I was trying to stop shaking, so I pulled out my yearbook. Just something to do, right? I flipped through it, seeing all the stupid, cheerful notes. Hags. Never change. Pure noise. Then I hit Caleb's page. Caleb was in my class, but I didn't know him at all. He was this intensely quiet guy, pale, always wore a black hoodie, never spoke. I barely remembered asking him to sign my book, maybe 3 weeks ago. I figured he just wrote his name. But what he wrote, it wasn't a signature. It was a dedication, and it was horrifying. His handwriting was tiny and neat, like a surgeon's, but the words were a punch to the gut. It said, "I know what you did on the pier. The waves wash away the sand, but they don't erase the footprints. Today, the lockdown is for you." I almost dropped the book. The pier. 2 years ago, I'd done something incredibly stupid and selfish there, something I was terrified would ever get out. No one, and I mean no one, knew the specifics except for me. I barely remembered Caleb even being around that year. How could he know? I looked up, scanning the huddled group. My brain was racing. The lockdown is for you. Was he serious? Was this some sick joke? I had to find him. I whispered to the girl next to me, "Is Caleb here?" She just shook her head, terrified, and shushed me. Mr. Davies was quiet, listening to the door, his face a mask of focus. After maybe 5 minutes, he pulled out his digital roster and started whispering the roll call. You had to whisper present back. He was just confirming who was accounted for. My heart was hammering. He got past the C's, then stopped. He looked back at the digital screen, then at the empty corner of the room where Caleb usually sat. "Caleb," he whispered, louder than necessary. Silence. He called the name again. "Caleb?" Nothing. Mr. Davies went back to his roster, scrolling up and down, checking the notes. He rubbed his temples and then, slowly, he raised his head. He didn't look at the class. He didn't look at the door. He looked straight at me. The air in the room got impossibly tight. Mr. Davies's eyes, full of this cold, professional fear, were just locked on mine. He must have seen my name next to Caleb's on the roster, or maybe he saw me nervously clutching the yearbook. He didn't speak. He just slowly put the roster down. That's when I knew. The chilling, personalized threat in my hands, and the missing person who wrote it. The lockdown wasn't some random external event. It wasn't a fire. It wasn't a drill. The perimeter was secured to trap the class while Caleb, the person who knew my darkest secret and was hunting me, was already outside, or worse, already somewhere inside the building. The terror wasn't the lockdown itself. The terror was realizing that every kid in that room was a shield, and I was the target. And the hunter was already gone. The next hour was the longest of my life. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Every tiny noise, the creak of the door frame, the squeak of the cabinet, sounded like footsteps. Mr. Davies sat guard, staring at the door with this intense, protective focus. Nobody spoke. The other kids were bored, whispering about rumors of a shooter or an escaped inmate, completely unaware that the threat was about the guy sitting 2 feet away from the yearbook. I kept the yearbook clutched in my lap, feeling the weight of Caleb's note. I wanted to tell Mr. Davies, but what if that just made me a bigger target? What if Caleb was listening, somehow? The whole situation felt like a twisted, personalized game. I looked at the note again. The waves wash away the sand, but they don't erase the footprints. I could almost hear the tide. He knew. Finally, after what felt like 5 hours, the intercom crackled back to life. It wasn't the robotic voice this time. It was the principal, and his voice was shaky, strained. The lockdown is over. Repeat, the lockdown is over. Exit the building immediately and calmly. Police are securing the grounds. Do not linger. We all burst out of that corner, a collective gasp of relief. Mr. Davies threw the fire extinguisher aside and unlocked the door. I was the first one out. I didn't care about my backpack, I just ran, clutching the yearbook. As I hit the main hall, it was chaos. Sirens were screaming outside, and uniformed officers were everywhere, moving fast, carrying rifles. They weren't looking at us, they were looking past us, scanning the upper level and the far exits. I ran right out the front doors and didn't stop until I was across the street, leaning against a chain-link fence, gulping down air. That's when I saw it on the school's marquee, the digital announcement board. They had changed the message. It used to say, "Have a great summer." Now, scrolling below the school name, was this new message. Caleb D. is now considered missing and dangerous. And just below that, in smaller, scrolling letters, students who share classes with him, please contact counseling immediately. I stood there, staring at the sign, feeling the yearbook in my hands like a ticking bomb. They didn't find him. He had initiated the lockdown, used it as cover, and then vanished. He didn't try to hurt the school, he just wanted to send a message. I looked back at the peer note for the last time. I was now out of the building, safe for now, but Caleb was still out there, with my name and my secret, and he had made it clear, summer was not freedom. It was just the next scene in his game.